I'm waiting for it to start recording. Come on. This is perfect. Now it's on my end. What is going on here? Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mercatani with another episode of Mat Chat, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Fresh off the plane from Fargo, North Dakota, the head coach from Stanford University, Rob Koll. Coach, I've talked to you for years on and off, and been talking to you recently a lot more, and I'm excited to have you on the show, man. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I've been talking to Leith a lot, and he's a Kansas City guy, and we have some mutual friends, and I know Duran and those guys are out there, and I was like, Stanford's had this resurgence. I think it's interesting to look back now at everything that happened, super conferences, all this stuff. So I wanted to talk to you about it.
Okay.
The first thing I think of when I think of you is a program builder. And I think that has a lot to do with my relationship with Brian Smith and, your relationship with Brian. And when I came up, Missouri was not a school that, even if you lived in Missouri, was on the top of your list. And Brian's turned that program into that. And you've done that at schools that it was hard to do, especially with the academic limitations, which I'm sure we'll get into. And I know you don't want to give away the secret sauce, but we have a ton of high school coaches that watch this pod. Maybe just in terms of culture, or what you feel comfortable sharing, what do you think are maybe some pillars or core things that need to be in place to build a successful program?
First of all, I'm disappointed. The first thing you think about me is that I would think brutish good looks and devilish charm.
Devilish charm. Well, it sounds like we're going to have cocktails in a couple weeks, so that might help me.
You mentioned Brian. Brian was involved in the build at Cornell. I mean, it was overnight sensation, 32 years in the making, right? I mean, that didn't just happen. And the secret sauce isn't so secret. It just takes a whole lot of work. I mean, you got these programs. They got to own you. And if you're not fully into building the program, and you're in the wrong profession. I speak on fundraising development quite a bit, with Mike Moyer and the NWCA, and I always talk about the line I always use, and this is from experience. When I was a younger coach, I always use the line, work to make your job great, not to get a great job. And ultimately, either way, you'll get a great job. Because when I was young, I just worked so hard because I was trying to develop our program to get to a different program. So I wasn't thinking long term as far as developing the program, developing alumni relationships, and developing relationships with staff and faculty, because I'm leaving, man. I'm not going to be here next year. I'm going to be some better place. And when I stopped being so internally selfish and started working on just purely developing these, because I didn't get a job for many, many years, and didn't even get interviews, and started focusing on the problem at hand, which was developing and just creating the resources to be successful at Cornell. I started developing those relationships, and lo and behold, the job that I was desiring was the job I had. And so it's something, it's hard to tell these coaches, because they're always looking to the right and looking to their left. And you'll hear about coaches who, certain guys, it's almost a running joke. They're always applying for, certain jobs. And that gets back to the kids you're recruiting. Now, I jumped ship after 32 years, but that was completely different. My wife and I had made a decision that we were going to retire and move and try something different, and wanted to live in a different part of the country. So that was going to happen inevitably. But I wasn't planning on going into a different school, but it wasn't really directly competing with Cornell, at least in my mind. And ultimately, we did take a lot of the recruits right off the bat. But two, it was just a different adventure. So getting back to what I would tell young coaches is, a lot of the things I did to help build Cornell, I didn't think were transferable, but they were. I was able to. Now I have all those friends I made at Cornell are still our friends at Stanford. They still help me get kids jobs. They still give to the program. And so don't always look to your right, to your left, but look straight ahead. And imagine that job that you have now is the job you're going to have 30 years from now. And if you approach your job that way, you make different decisions. You make decisions that will benefit you not in the short run, but also in the long run. And that might seem obvious, but it's really not, because there are things you would do as far as developing your alumni base. And you can do that in college. You can certainly do it in high school. And I teach the same tenets of development and fundraising to high school coaches as I do to college coaches. You still have an alumni base. You have young kids who are going to go off and become successful and graduate from Stanford, but they also graduated from State College High School in my situation, giving back to that program. And no program, whether it's a junior college, Division 1, 2, 3, or high school or Pee Wee program, can't be made better through philanthropy and generosity of their alumni.
Yeah, I got a couple of buddies that coach high school, and I can't wait to text them and tell us the first 5 minutes of this or something I think they're not thinking about enough. Like I always, when you coach junior college, I think I've told you this privately, like every night your phone doesn't ring after 11 o'clock is a win, because it's never a good call after 11. Like, hey, just want to let you know I got an A in algebra, like it's never a good call. But it does feel like that building that culture is something that can be done at all those different levels, whether it's like you and I would never step on, like if a kid was going to go to Cornell, he wasn't going to junior college. So there was never like any overlap kind of thing where, like we were talking to the same kids base. I mean, there was kids probably we wanted that you got, and maybe there were some kids that couldn't get into Cornell that you would have liked. So, but I just feel like watching just how programs grow and the culture. And like you said, like I always thought, I think a lot of coaches get mixed up and think the 2.5 hours or however many hours a day you're in the practice room is, those are clearly important, super important. But I think that's a small pie of what coaching is. And like you said, building relationships, hiring the right staff, getting coaches to get along with each other. I know some staffs are super dysfunctional and that all the coaches don't even really like each other. And, building a situation like that. So, did your dad was obviously a legend in wrestling. Did you have mentors that helped you figure this out? Or did you just kind of like you said, once I focused, stop looking left and right, you just started figuring things out as being brutishly good looking and incredibly intelligent?
Well, hey, I had, I've seen coaches for better and worse. I've had people affect my life and I've taken from them both ways. I'm like, what? I won't do it this way. I'll do it this way. Jack Spates was a great mentor of mine. I thought he was fantastic as far as his work ethic, and I steal from other coaches. I always talk Roger Reina at Penn, what he was able to do at Penn when we were first there. He kicked our butts for years, and did a great job of developing an alumni base, and a lot of the things that I stole from him. And there's not as many coaches. Jay Robinson, I remember sitting and listening to Jay Robinson talk, and he had this flow chart, of organizational flow chart, and I'm like, at the time I was like, that's great for a company, but what about me? And building a program is the same as building an effective organization in any whether it's a business or a government. You surround yourself with the right people. Those are your lieutenants, and you make sure that they know what their job is, that's organization is my biggest weakness, and yet so I have to focus on it. I know that, so I surround myself with people who are complementary to me. At Cornell, I had amazing group of assistant coaches, starting from Brian Smith, and I don't want to miss anybody. Brian Smith, yeah. Damian Hahn, Steve Garland, Mike Gray. I'm Matt Azevedo. I've had so many great assistants that I apologize to Jordan Leans and Troy Nickersons and Jeremy Spates. They're those guys all. I have had all, and now they're all very effective head coaches. And so yeah, we do a lot of things maybe differently, but everyone should do what we do, and that's just it's not just teaching. Anybody can teach single legs and double legs. That's the easy part. Any good high school coach could do the technical aspects of running a program, of actual the technique side of, because if you go watch the NCAA tournament, you're not going to see anything all that different than you see in high school. The kids just do it a little bit better, little subtleties. It's the motivation. It's keeping the kids focused. It's getting them It's getting the practice so that every practice they're incredibly intense and peaking at the right time. Those are the subtleties that make a good coach great. Teaching the technique is the easy part. And I didn't get that right off the bat. I remember I'd go in, we'd start working kids out at 6 a.m. because they had classes or whatever that conflicted with drilling during the day, and I didn't get out of that room till 7 p.m. and that's how I thought I should coach. And in my father's day, it was a little different. So, he was a full-time tenured professor at Penn State and full-time wrestling coach with one part-time assistant for most of his career. And it was just a completely different profession then. Now it's full-time coaching and fundraising and a million of the other things. And recruiting has become significantly larger aspect. In the old days, you could take a kid and develop them. And heck, even when I was wrestling, I don't like to call that the old days. I was the first freshman All-American at North Carolina. And at Cornell, it was a rare year we didn't have a freshman All-American. And I expect in the very near future, we'll have that same thing going here at Stanford. So if that's the case, you need to spend a disproportionate amount of your time on recruitment, because I can spend a million hours in a room with a kid who doesn't have the athletic talent and background, and I'm still not going to get him to where Yannick Giacomo-Hollis is as a true freshman, or Kyle Dake or Gabe Dean or any number of these guys who just step in and are ready for battle right off the shelf.
Yeah, that's a conversation I had with my father, who thought like you could develop, and we had raised a bunch of money, and one year we recruited, and the first year we recruited really hard. We had 3 national champions, and somebody's like, "Man, it's great." I'm like, "You think we learned a new way to finish a single leg? Like we stopped running a horse race with Clydesdales. We finally got some thoroughbreds that could run with everybody else."
Oh, Dave, I always have people tell me, they say, you need to get those kids who are 3rd, 4th because they're hungry still. I said, show me an 18-year-old kid who's peaked. Just because he's won a national championship does not mean he's peaked. He's 18 years old.
Right.
I mean, he's probably working harder than that kid who took 3rd, or else that kid who took 3rd wouldn't have taken 3rd, right? I mean, he would take it 1st. So the idea that you're catching guys who are haven't reached their potential. Well, I have yet to see an 18-year-old who's reached his potential.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, back in the day, whatever the old days were or weren't, but it was a lot easier to find kids that were off the radar because every match in the world wasn't streamed. Everybody didn't have social media. There were kids that just wrestled in their state tournament and couldn't afford to go anywhere else. And you could, if you had the right network, like if you call David Mirikitani in St. Louis, like, hey, who's the best kid there nobody knows about? Now everybody knows about everybody. It's more like, what is the baggage that goes with this kid, if there is any kind of thing.
Yeah, and I won't recruit a kid who hasn't done a Super 32 or a Fargo or a Ironman. If he's a kid out of random state, Montana, and he's a 4-time Montana state champ, but he hasn't done anything nationally because, unfortunately, maybe he doesn't have the financial wherewithal, I won't take a chance on that kid. They have to get that exposure. So there aren't as many risks, although we were always really good at Cornell at getting those kids who other people didn't take risks on. And people give me all the credit in the world for finding those kids. I think a lot of that is just the nature of Cornell, in that it's a lot of need-based aid. If you're a school, if you're at Iowa or Penn State, you're not going to invest in a kid who hasn't done a lot of the big tournaments. At Cornell, since we're not offering scholarship, all we're giving is a spot. Maybe it's easier to take those risks, and as such, you have those kids who are under the radar. I would love to take all the credit for it, but I think a lot of that's an environmental condition of the school in which I was working.
Yeah, it makes sense. You mentioned, it's funny, this is why you're such a good guest coach. Like the next note I had was to talk to you about your coaching tree, and you mentioned all those names. And I talked to you off the air, like I'm good friends with Bricker Dixon, who's the assistant coach at Liberty High School, who has 2 kids wrestling in the Fargo finals today. And they're juniors. So we can actually say their names out loud if we wanted to, and it's not a recruiting violation. But, you mentioned all the Garlands, et cetera, all those guys. I don't know how to ask this, so it's not like a canned answer. I mean, I'm sure you're super proud of these guys. Like my dad has a ton of guys that are coaching all over the country. I guess, what is that feeling like for those of us that, don't have multiple people coaching at multiple levels? and you see them doing things, like take a Liberty High School, because that's a place close to me where they've won state the last couple of years by over 100 points. And you and I both know what a hard worker Bricker is, just nose to the ground, keep his, I talk about a guy whose eyes straight ahead. What does that feel like for a guy that's literally had these kind of kids come through their program and be a part of their lives at a specifically impactful time?
I mean, obviously, it's the culmination is where they end up, whether it's coaching or whether it's in engineering or working for Google or what or independent, selling across the country. Well, all the kids who've graduated from Cornell and now Stanford are not. I can't think of a kid who hasn't been extremely successful. Now, quality and quality out. You're getting the best and the brightest. They better be successful. And for schools like Cornell to say, well, or Stanford say, well, we made them. Like, well, mom and dad made them, and mom and dad, 18 cumulative, pretty darn. I give credit more to the people I surround these kids than the school itself. Now, don't get me wrong, Stanford is an amazing place and opportunities abound. And the people who graduate here have done so well, we can tie them in and there's going to be unbelievable connections. But even more important are the types of kids I bring in and will surround your kids, your children with. I mean, they're all good, wholesome, hard-working kids who want to be incredibly successful on the mats and then incredibly successful upon graduation. As far as that tree of coaches, I'm really proud of that because I feel like I'm a very positive person, and I think they see how much joy I get out of the sport and out of coaching, and maybe I've been able to push them towards the sport because of they go, man, I want to be like Rob, not like. I mean, obviously, I want to look like me. I mean, don't get me wrong. But
yeah, we all do.
They see the joy. I mean, I'm a happy guy, and I think there's a lot of unhappy people out there with jobs that maybe pay real well and are miserable, and a lot of jobs that don't pay real well and that are miserable.
Yeah.
And coaching can be both. It can, you can make a good living in the sport now. And even if you're not making a great living, at least you're joyful. One of my last guys who joined the ranks is Connor Lepresi, coaching women's college, head coach of women's college down south. So I didn't get any credit for Connor. Connor, the shout out for you, buddy. I saw my far
here you go. Let's do it.
And then in the near future, you're going to have another one who's going to be mentioned. Who just it's going to be accepting a Division I job, which is going to be announced here shortly. Who was one of the kids who was in our program for a little while. But so it's I think it's exciting because a lot of it's because they see how we coach, and I like to think that I'm an extremely positive coach who doesn't. I've seen coaches who are just miserable people who make life miserable on their kids, and I don't think that's necessary. And you look at the coaches out there. I mean, it's like, hey, nobody said Cale Sanderson's a raging. You know what? I mean, he's obviously a very a good, wholesome person, and it's not just because he's a good coach. He's just a good person. And I don't even get along with the guy that well, but I can still give him props because I'd said, but in my litmus test is, would I send my son to wrestle for the person? And 90% of the coaches in Division I would. There's about 10% that I wouldn't. And so that's probably the greatest compliment I can give to somebody.
Yeah, it's that criteria is something I think that a lot of people make a lot of important decisions on, like, would I want that person influencing a family member? So Stanford, I think the one story we don't need to talk about because it's been talked to death is, the program was on the chopping block. It was saved. The Shane Griffith part of that, is before you got there, that whole thing. I'm interested, I feel like when we started doing the other podcast where we talked about what was going on every week, it originally started as an in-season one, and the other 30 weeks of the year, I didn't know where we were going to come up with content. Never been a problem. There's always something going on. But it feels like a lot of what we're talking about now in the offseason, besides the events, the USA Wrestling senior level events, are NIL, RTCs, and now these super conferences. So you're a guy that understands the business aspect of wrestling, I think, better than most. As a person that his vocation is in the business world, I would like to think I understand it better than a lot of people, but I like talking to people that literally their vocation is coach and they understand business. super conferences, RTCs, NIL, any of those things you want to talk about in whatever order. I'm super interested in your opinion on them.
Well, super conferences are completely out of our, power. Like we have absolutely nothing to do with them. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they're like, "Well, the wrestling Big Ten ratings are good." I'm like, "All right, nobody gives a rat's ass about the Big Ten wrestling ratings. They don't even care about the Big Ten foot basketball ratings. They only care about football." And the naivety that you would think that they're going to start wrestling at USC and UCLA because of the Big Ten. It's just like only wrestling people would be so naive to think that, and for me to say that out publicly does not make it less likely to occur, because I would be the first person who wants that to happen. But I'm just realistic. I know that how this works now, unless someone comes up and offers them $40 million, because it's not going to be, we'll fund a wrestling team. Okay, well, what about the women's program you have to start? How about the dietitians you have to hire? How about the strength coach you got to hire? How about the compliance person you got to hire? How about, there are hidden costs to these things. How about the facilities? How about the mats? How about the uniform? You're an AD. You don't give a darn. Unless you wrestled, you don't care about wrestling. You do not care. And they're non-enrollment driven schools. So why would they add it? All an AD is, that's like, why would I want to add more work to my plate? And then when you talk to wrestling people, they're like, well, it's like, okay, well then I took it this way. Oh my God, the USC and UCLA, I just added wrestling. I mean, just added the teams to the Big Ten. Are they going to add lacrosse and hockey? And you're a wrestling person. You're like, why would they do that?
Right.
It's like, it's
what happens to beach volleyball because now they're in the Big Ten? Yeah,
they're not gonna do this because it's not part of the conversation. Now, if the only way this happens is that at schools like UCLA and USC, which are incredibly difficult programs to get into, they've got a line 10 miles long to get in there. They've got people getting thrown in jail for paying $1 million to get their kids into those schools.
I knew you were going to bring it up, Coach. That's so good.
Only way that's getting added is if someone with a USC or UCLA background comes in and offers enormous money. And even then, you're not adding money, you're adding sports, you're still adding work to an athletic director's plate.
Yeah.
And they don't want to add work to their own plate, because even if you get the bills paid, you still have facilities. You've got facilities that have to manage that now you have a conflict with a basketball and volleyball and wrestling match. You've got compliance issues. You've got behavioral issues. I don't want to do it. And so for that reason, unfortunately, they're not going to be added. As far as NIL and RTC, that's an interesting conversation, because the NIL is going to directly impact the RTC. And these RTC athletes don't seem to understand that. I had a conversation with one, and he heard how much money a couple kids were making. He goes, oh man, I wonder what my value is. And I wanted to say, about half it was what it was before that kid made that money. But they don't get that, because they live in a different world. They had a good run for the last 2 years because that was the only show in town, and that's how you got kids to come to your schools, is get the athlete. Now, and that leads another problem. You have some schools that it's wild west. You can go to some, and I'm not going to mention names, but there are some schools that have full, the coaches negotiating the deals through the RTCs, and it's completely okay with you compliance, because it's just how they do it. You've got other schools that can't do anything like that. We're kind of in between, but it's a reality that everyone has to face. And I know what our guys were getting offered before they were on the portal, mind you, and it's a lot of money if it's true, and it's just crazy, but that too will have a moment where you have these extreme numbers. I can't imagine the world of basketball and football, and there's gotta be something, because every year the guy's going to hop on. Every year, if you're smart, you're hopping on the portal. I'm going to get on the portal again. Well, I had a great year. I'm going to hop on the portal. If I'm in football, for instance, Penn State's now offering me $1 million a year. Well, Alabama, you better offer me $1 million too.
Yeah.
And so I get my $1 million too, and then there's a 1 year, and then next year I'll get on the portal again. I mean, it's just insane, because there's got to be some type of contractual obligations, because at Stanford, I think we're in a good place because people want their Stanford degree. We're in a weird situation now that people expedited the graduation date, and they have the extra year of eligibility. So I've got a lot of kids who can graduate out, and then if you can get into grad school, if you can't get in, it's just a little bit in flux. But I'm okay with that because we're bringing in a new crew that will start fresh. I've got a great group of kids here, but not a lot of them because we missed an entire recruiting class, and there was one class in there that was very small. So, our roster is still going to be pretty small until a whole nother recruiting class.
Yeah. Well, you said something that I want to make sure people understand. So I think originally RTCs were paying senior level athletes because, like, okay, I pay whoever, Rob Koll, who just graduated and won 3 NCAA titles and is an elite, on the Olympic ladder. And now by paying Rob Koll, I can recruit whoever to come to school here. And now instead of just doing that, they can just pay the athletes directly. The value of the hypothetical Rob Koll athlete in that scenario, the RTC athlete, goes down. Because I think if you talk to most people, and I'll say this and get out of the way, most people, if you said to them, hey, I'm going to donate $10,000 to the XYZ RTC / program, I'd rather see a guy make the Olympic team, or I'd rather see our university win a national title. I feel like 9 out of 10 of them would say win a national title.
Well, it depends. If it's Cornell and it's Yanni Diakomahalis or Kyle Dake, they might say they want to win the Olympics because it's one and the same. You know what I mean? So they want to take care of their own. They don't want to bring in somebody from Cal Poly and to go to wrestles at Cornell who happens to make the Olympics. There's not the same emotional attachment. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
And unless you're a Yanni or a Kyle or a Jordan Burroughs or, there's probably 8 athletes that truly move the needle. The rest, nobody's coming to Cornell or Stanford or Cal Poly because of Bobby Boucher. You know what I mean? A guy who is 4th or 5th
Right.
or 6th on the, you know what I mean? Unless
Right.
there's a personal relationship, you're number 6 on the ladder. I mean, you're going to kick the living daylight out of everybody in our room. You add value to our room, but you're not really getting any value recruiting. I'm not getting kids because of certain, I'm not insult people's name, but nobody's coming because of, unless you've got this big name, it just doesn't have a lot of effect. And so for that reason, I believe, and I'm going to irritate a lot of people, but there's a lot of vanity and a lot of ego. There's nobody have bigger egos than wrestling people, right? But that's just the truth.
No, it is. And business is business. And, your point is well taken that like a Cornell would rather see, just as much want to see a Dake or a Yanni make the team. But like these people that have had people transfer, like, okay, I'm from Missouri. So if Jaden Cox goes and wins a world title, the Michigan RTC, those people are going to be proud of him. I mean, Missouri will claim him. Michigan will claim him. Like Thomas Gilman just won the tournament, and he's from Iowa, but Penn State and Iowa will probably both claim him, those kind of things. And I'm just using real people.
Yeah. But if he were to stay at Iowa, or if David Taylor's wrestling for a championship, Penn State people are going to pay more for David Taylor than David Taylor going to North Carolina. Then North Carolina people are going to pay for David Taylor.
Yeah.
There's that loyalty, and they care more if they, and that's how I believe I'm focusing on our RTC is Stanford centric. And if people don't want to be, or don't understand that the reason you're here is because of Stanford, then you need to go elsewhere. So for me, it's, I'd like to invest our money into our future Stanford wrestlers, as opposed to, now if I don't get someone if they're not on board with that, they can go elsewhere.
It feels like just with all of this stuff, like your point about the conferences, I said the same thing. Like, look, no one cares about wrestling, lacrosse, even men's basketball for the most part. It's just football. And that's what's, and wrestling people are very interesting. Like when they feel like they have the upper hand, they believe in capitalism. They should be very aware about not kicking out socialism, because if football just ran football and every other program had to pay for itself, there'd be a lot of programs that would have a lot of problems because they operate in the red based on coaches' salaries, travel budget, everything else, versus what they're actually bringing into the university.
Yeah, I mean, but it's deceptive too, because in those power conferences, even though you may be losing money, you're also bringing in huge money, television revenue that doesn't necessarily get attributed to football. So, but at a school like in Cornell, for instance, I mean, you're not making any money. You have 5,000 people at a game. Half of those don't, three quarters of those probably don't pay for the ticket. I would say Stanford, I'm sure Stanford loses money because of salaries and attendance, but you also have the Pac-10 network and all the other hidden costs, and then you have people coming in for homecoming and so it's hard to equate what football truly brings to a school. It's hard to say this is the number, even because there's a lot of advantages, whether and how many jerseys are you selling at the bookstore, and how much money are you making online.
Or people that pick that school just to attend so they can hang out at the football games.
Absolutely. So I do think you need to take football. People compare it, like, oh well, football. I'm like, why are you comparing yourself to football? You're not football. It's the same thing. It's the same argument with wrestling people getting upset about basketball. I'm like, guys, we're not basketball. You don't like it, go grow 7 inches and become a basketball coach. It's not relevant to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think we're saying the same thing. I don't know if I communicated it effectively. What I'm saying is that football, whatever, it's hard to put an exact number on it, but it's one of the things, especially at the big programs, that are actually profitable. And the TV contracts are being driven by that. And so non-revenue sports are called non-revenue sports for a reason. I understand there's a lot of coaches trying to show how much revenue wrestling actually generates, but you have to put revenue against expenses or overhead. So,
well, and we are not businessmen, most of us. I mean, it's the wrestling people say, well, I have 40 guys on my roster. Well, I said, I say, well, you have 100% enrollment. I mean, you have 100%, what's your acceptance rate? Oh, 50%. Like, well, that means there's 50% of the people. There's a long line of people who would take the place of the wrestlers, who are probably higher income, therefore not get as much financial aid. So the argument only holds in enrollment-driven schools. And now we're getting into some of the people, and you're listening to this probably don't understand what we're talking about, but it's a different conversation entirely.
Well, I just know this. Back in the junior college model, we coached at school that had 15,000 students, and we were coaching against schools that had 1,000 students. And those 1,000 student schools cared a lot more about those 40 wrestlers because they made up 4% of the population than us that, made 0.4% of the population. So,
well, look at Life College. I think they have, I know they have over 100 kids on their roster, not even counting women. And the school only has less than 500 kids enrollment. Life College used to be a small private, or it used to be a small chiropractic college in Atlanta. They're expanding their options. Over the quarter, their kids are wrestlers. I mean, they literally are saving that program, that school, and they're paying a lot of money to go there. So, he does an amazing job.
Shout out to Omi Acosta. That's my boy.
He's the man. I mean, my God, that guy needs to get a raise if he hasn't already gotten any. And in junior colleges, basically, it's 100% acceptance rates. So if you apply, you're getting in. So you are truly every guy you're getting in. You're bringing revenue. At Stanford, it's 3% acceptance rate. Like, if they don't take a wrestler, that seat's not going to be empty. And so Mike Moyer, in his infinite wisdom, has targeted small private enrollment-driven colleges, Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, to add wrestling, and you throw a mat down, you got 40 kids. Oh my goodness,
Yes.
It's just a great model, and I think I give him all the credit. Certainly, he's not the only person behind this, but they had 50 wrestling programs last year alone. The women have, I think, 120 women's programs now. It's just this secret that nobody knows about, that wrestling has been booming. I think, and we've added over 300 in the last, I don't know how many decade, but it's just amazing how many programs he's been helped get going. And of course, we've lost 500 plus since the culling of Title IX at inception, but we're well on our way back. It's just Division I is still lagging behind.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an enrollment-driven thing you said, and you use the analogy of USC, UCLA, like where they don't care if 40 more kids come or not because there's 4,000 kids that want those 40 spots. And like you said, people are going to jail. So, which is low-key very funny, Coach. Well played. So I wanted to talk to you. I was talking to somebody, and we were talking about when Dake came out of high school. And I remember when Dake came out, he was a big recruit. He was like a top 10 in the country guy. And so you've coached a 4-time national champ. You've had a hand in coaching another guy who is on his way to being a 4-time national champ. That's a very small club. And Cornell would be the first university to have 2 of those. I don't know how to say this. Did you feel like when you had those guys, when you recruited those guys, like, because there's no red shirt here at Cornell, you can gray shirt them, you can send them to the junior college, but if not, you got to go right away. Did you feel like these guys could be this special? And probably just as importantly is what made you think whatever you thought about them?
Well, Kyle, I've known since he's knee-high to grasshopper, right? I mean, his dad was in his room when Kyle was being born and had to leave. I remember had to leave practice early because I remember teasing him, calling him a damn sissy. Kyle was always uber athletic, but I don't think anyone anticipated, that rapid ascension. I remember watching him wrestle Mike Gray in the summer, and Mike gave it to him pretty early on. And then by the fall, it was even. By December, Kyle was whipping him and never looked back. But so that was, and he was a good recruit, but he was only a 2-time small school state champion. He wasn't a rock star. He did win the high school nationals 3 times. Back then, that meant something. Now it's not the same tournament, but it was still good. But he never won junior nationals. He never did anything. It wasn't like he was. I mean, I'm surprised he was top 10. But at the very end he went out to Vegas. I mean, we did well in the tournament there. Yanni, we knew, was special because he was also a kid who grew up, coming to the RTC in Ithaca, and so I've known him since he was very, very young as well. So yeah, he was obviously special. The other ones like Travis Lee. I mean, people don't give enough credit to Travis Lee. He was a guy who helped us really turn the program around. He had 4-time.
I have his name written down here to ask about him. Yeah.
Yeah, he lives about 20 minutes down the road from us. He was one of the all-time greats, and would have been. I think would have been our first modern day Olympian if he didn't hurt his neck and had to retire. It's really special athlete. So I've been really blessed to have coached, so many 4-time All-Americans. I don't know, during my tenure, I'm sure I had more 4-time All-Americans than any other coach. Travis and Nashawn Garrett and Gabe Dean and would have been Max Dean had we not had the pandemic and Yanni and Kyle and Vito Ruja. I mean, just they're a dime a dozen. But each one is unique in what they brought to the table. I have others, and I'm missing a couple, and I apologize. But one of the guys who was one of the best we ever had was Mac Lunas. Never won a national championship, so you never know who's going to, out of high school, who's going to be that superstar, and who's going to be good, and who's not going to make it.
I heard a coach say one time, if you could figure out if a kid loves wrestling or if a kid loves winning, that would be a very good indicator on whether they're going to make it. Because, like I was watching last night, so we're recording this on the 19th, and last night, the first episode of The Captain, which is about Derek Jeter, came on. And I like watching anything that's about winners. And he said how he was just struggling in the minor leagues. And, that he literally called his mom and dad and said, "Can I come home? Can I give the signing bonus back?" And they said, "No, you can't." And we've all had that moment. And,
so what was because I have a very strong opinion about that, by the way. What was the consensus? They were saying they just got to find the guy who loves wrestling.
They were saying if somebody just is only in it because they're good at it and winning, that when they stop winning, that they're going to quit. And that the person that loves the sport and is going to stick with it and find a way to win, that's the person that's going to make it.
Yeah, that's a lot of psychobabble. Sounds good, but it's a bunch of bullshit. Okay. I mean, that's the key to successful coaches: find out what motivates a kid. Some love the sport, some love winning. For me, I freaking hated losing. That's more important.
My dad said that to me. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
It's more important to me than all the others combined. I hated losing. I didn't love wrestling. I like lacrosse. I love baseball. They're fun. Wrestling's not fun. Whoever tells you wrestling's fun is lying. Like, I mean, literally, it's not physically fun. It's fun to win. It's fun to win. But the wrestling side, I mean, it's not like playing baseball or golf. That's fun. So you love the game. No, you love winning. You hate losing. You do it because it's it's part of you, who you are. I mean, I like to compete, and there's no better way to compete. And I use wrestling as the vehicle for that. It's not that I innately love grabbing some guy and throwing him on the mat. I mean, I'd rather play lacrosse, but I'm better in wrestling, and they didn't have lacrosse when I was growing up. But for me, it's about not losing. I frickin' hate losing. I'm a terrible loser, and I'm first to admit it. I was the youngest of six, and man, when my brothers beat me in Risk or Monopoly, that went flying. I'm not much better. I'm still not much better. I will cheat in those games. I will cheat.
We're not making you the banker, Coach. You're not the banker, Rob.
My wife has to watch me in these board games, and it's part of the game. You take a little extra money from board
pilfering money. That's funny. My dad said to me, he's like, I always wanted a guy that hated to lose more than they loved to win. So I think it sounds like you guys are on the same page on that.
Yeah. And I hate people coming up with these very clever little, analogies. Drives me crazy because put pigeonhole everybody into one little. Well, everybody who's this, I'm like, give me a break.
Yeah. No, I obviously understanding what makes individual people tick is important. Now, Coach, you've had very strong opinions on this. I think in one sense you're still on one side of it, but you've been on the other side of it. And we're on USA Wrestling's airwaves, so go gently here. What do you think about the Olympic trials process? I was in Nebraska. I think it was in 2018, 17. You would know better than me. The 2 out of 3 with Dake and JB.
Real simple. This is so simple. You have the U.S. Open. U.S. Open should mean something. And then you go right from there to Final X. There need not be a second. You're getting us to, okay, you have the U.S. Open Nationals. Then you have the World Team Trials. Then you have the Super Final X. Like, what the heck are we doing? Why are we spending thousands and thousands of dollars making our guys weigh in all these times, all these opportunities to get hurt? And the reality is 99% of the time, the guys who win the damn U.S. Open are going to be our world team members. I mean, that's just bottom line.
So,
have a you could do 2 out of 3 in Vegas and save the time, save everybody's money. 2 out of 3, everybody wrestles it. The guy, you can have Kyle sit out if you place. He sits out to the finals. If you want to have Flo take it over and make money off it and promote it, make it a bigger event, U.S. Open, right to Final X. Guy who wins U.S. Open stands at Final X. If you want to give a guy who's a world team member, sits out the U.S. Open and sits at Final X, that's fine with me. Final X, you wrestle day wrestle 1. No, day 2 is the finals.
So I want to make sure I frame what I thought your opinion was for years, that it was unfair for like Dake to have to go through a tournament, beat everybody, and then that same night or the next day have to wrestle a fresh Burroughs 2 out of 3.
Of course. And when I benefited from that years ago, but didn't make it right. You know what I mean? I remember when Kenny had to come through the grinder, but that is what it is. But
do you think it should just be like the part where, like, if you're the guy,
some advantage, you should have some advantage, but it shouldn't be obscene advantage. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't have like Kyle had to, wrestle 4 matches, then he wrestles Jordan Burroughs 2 out of 3. Give me a break. That's ridiculous. And as I said, I years ago was even worse. But it's really simple. U.S. Open, you are world top 3. You can sit out to the Final X if you want to.
How soon would Final X be after the Open?
I don't care.
So you do think there should be a break, though?
I don't necessarily think you should need a break. I think you should send these guys overseas and have the guys prep for the World Championships. That's my opinion. I don't think you have to spend all this extra money qualifying and having the World Team Trials and everything else. I think you have. If it were me, if you win the World Championships, you take more top 3. You sit out to the finals of the U.S. Option 1. You sit out to the finals of the U.S. Open. You wrestle the U.S. Open, and then you hit the guy 2 out of 3. On that last day. I don't think that's great because not everybody's going to be able to sit out, and then you have a guy who goes through the whole U.S. Open. But it'd be very difficult. I think what you do is you wrestle the U.S. Open, the winners advance to the Final X. If you have top 3 in the world, you get to sit out and you in Final X. So it would be if US Open, if there's no guy who sits out, those two finalists would go immediately to the Final X. As we're doing it now, we fly guys to Vegas, we wrestle in Vegas, we pay for the rooms, we pay for all that stuff, then we fly guys to Ohio or Iowa,
this year,
pay for the rooms and pay for all that. Then we fly the guys to Final X, and half of them are going to New York, half of them are going to frickin' Texas. So now we got to fly coaches at both those places. What the hell are you doing, USA Wrestling? You're killing me, Bender. Stop. Oh
my God. Because these are my bosses. You're killing me, coach.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Bender. I love Bender. I'm busting his chops, but it's like, and I know you get paid for Flo kicks some money back to USA Wrestling, but man, you should be paying for those freaking flights for these guys because it's too much. I'm flying a coach to Vegas, to Iowa. I mean, to Iowa, to Texas, to New York, and trainers, and it's we should be taking that money and putting into the athletes. We don't need to be spending, and you know what? The results are the exact same if you did it my way. 100% the exact results. There's no difference. And the goal is, if your goal is to get the best guy, my result, and every single rational human being who doesn't have a financial string attached would say, yes, Rob, that makes sense. No one can argue it. No one can make an argument.
I don't have an argument either way. I just, a couple of weight classes, there wouldn't been, like I remember Kendrick Maple won the US Open and then lost in the quarterfinals of the trials, but your point is well taken.
So what? That's that. Don't lose. Don't, I mean, that's
no,
that's
what are you
why
saying?
the US Open matters. Now the US Open doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's like nobody gives a damn. When I was wrestling US Open, that's where you'd have 10,000 people. I remember Tanya Tucker singing the national anthem and it had fireworks. There were probably 6,000 people there. It was a great event. And it was a really exciting event. And then we went to the World Team Trials after that, and those were a little slightly convoluted. But do the Final X, do it all in one time, so you're not having people want to go to people don't have the ability to fly to both of those things. It's just only in wrestling do we do some of these things. It just doesn't make sense.
I want to end the podcast on a positive note.
So, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And it doesn't mean I don't like the guys. It doesn't mean I don't understand. I don't understand why they're doing it. But hey, Flo, tough luck, buddy. You can't have everything. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You gotta.
Coach, you're killing me. They help me with my charity work. You're killing me.
Hey, they're good guys. But if I were working for those guys, I'd be doing the same thing. But I'm not. All right. So I'm an athlete's advocate and I'm a coach's advocate. And I'm paying the darn bills of flying these guys all over the place, including support staff. And it's cost prohibitive. And then we shouldn't be making the guys making weight all those times, in my opinion, to wrestle the same people.
I want to change the subject. So I've talked to you off the air a couple times here, and you've told me how much you love Stanford. You've told me how well, and I can be general, how well recruiting is going. This is, and I know you're uncomfortable at sales coach and kind of shy and introverted, so we'll try to pull something out of you here, but give people.
You got me.
Give me the sales pitch on why Stanford.
See that sky?
I do. And that luscious head lettuce, coach. You look good.
Always blue and sunny. I always say Stanford is Harvard academically. We are what Cornell was for years wrestling, and we have palm trees, and sunshine. I mean, it's everything. It's a perfect combination of academics and athletics. I can say this with no hesitation. Both my kids went to Cornell, and if I had my druthers, they would have been at Stanford. It's just more opportunity. We have the ability to redshirt. We have the ability to go to grad school. We have scholarships, and we have an amazing needs-based financial aid system. So we have those four, which, and the best school in the world. Nobody else can say that. And hey, we had 60 Olympians in the last Olympics. 60 Olympians across all the sports.
I was going to talk about the alumni list in other sports,
but no other school even came close to that. If we can do that in every other sport, don't tell me we can't be dominant in wrestling. It just boggles my mind that anyone would say that you're not going to be. I had people say, "Oh, yeah, it's going to take you a while." Like, I don't know what you're talking about. It isn't going to take long. It's just in last year we didn't have a recruiting class, so yeah, we are a year behind schedule, but only because we didn't get that class. I mean, the kids that we're looking at now, the who's who at Fargo this week, and we've got the next 3 years lined up. We can't talk to those kids yet, but we have their transcripts. We know they're academically eligible. And when I came here last year, and we still signed a top 10 or top 5 recruiting class, and we did it in 6 months. And so what we've been able to do over the last year has been better. And then now with that rising junior class, it's going to be really special. We've got to get them to commit and obviously get them accepted, but it's going to be really special. And we've raised about $23 million so far, which will allow us. And the prior regime was instrumental in getting that going. So I don't want to take all the credit for that. They did a great job building that base, and we've been able to increase it. And it's only going to get better. We were only working with 4.5 scholarships. They had 5. They cut us back down to 4.5, and then we got it back up to 5. And then next year we were 6.5, and then 8, and then 10, 9.9. So we're in a progression to be where we need. And I didn't want to have them all overnight because I needed some fiscal discipline. If I don't want to have 5 scholarships to give all away this year, and then have no money next year. So that was by my own decision of how we progress.
Space it out, yeah. All right, so Coach, this has been really fun for me. Say hi to Duran for me. Say hi to Leith for me. It sounds like I'm going to see you in a couple weeks, so yes, I'm really looking forward to that. This has been a lot of fun. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
Thanks, David.